Thank you, Governor, for that presentation. I dare say very often great minds think alike, and when we're dealing with the same information, we sometimes tend to repeat the same things. I have found that in making presentations like these, there are times when persons listen in at a later date and miss some very salient points that would have been made in the earlier presentation. So it is never a problem to repeat what has been said. I would like to first of all start off by thanking the people of Anguilla for their patience, their tolerance, and understanding in helping us through these challenges that we have faced over the last 30 months. Since August 2013. The Anguilla United Front, our party, in coming to office, had as the aspect of a platform as well as outlined in our manifesto the importance of ensuring that we return stability to the indigenous banking sector. And an aspect of that has been the need for a resolution to the banks that, first of all, ensured that customers' deposits were protected, ensured that the indigenous bank character of our banking sector was maintained, to ensure that staff and management of the bank were considered in whatever resolution took place, to ensure that we are in a position as a government to put in place the kind of economic activity to support the banking sector going forward. Because, as I've continued to point out, the failure of the banks has not been a deliberate action on the part of the people of Anguilla or the customers of the bank. It has been that they've been put in a position where they were genuinely unable to meet their obligations. As a consequence, the banks were in very challenging times. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank came in 2013 with the support of the Monetary Council, which included the Chief Minister of Anguilla, and was directed to assume control of the Commercial Bank of Anguilla Limited and the National Commercial Bank and the National Bank of Anguilla. The objectives of that action were: one, to stabilize and restructure both banks and return them to a state of normalcy, to protect depositors and creditors, and ensure that the stability of the banking system in Anguilla, and by extension the entire currency union, was maintained. Following the assumption of control, the CCB and the NBA were placed under a period of conservatorship. The ECCB had full control of the banks for 6 months in the first instance. And after consultation with and on the approval of the Monetary Council, the ECCB extended the period of conservatorship as some of the conditions which occasioned the intervention still persisted. As it sought to advance the objectives of the intervention, it was recognized that the existing legislative tools were inadequate to expeditiously address issues prior to the intervention, as well as to effectively resolve the banks in a timely manner. The governor pointed out some of the legislative reforms that were necessary: the amendments to the ECCB agreement, the passage of the new Banking Act, the enactment of legislation for the establishment of the Eastern Caribbean Asset Management Corporation. As you know, in Anguilla, the government worked hard to implement all these pieces of legislation in November of 2015. And we waited patiently for assent to that legislation so that we can proceed with the implementation process. As the governor pointed out, today is Resolution Day. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those persons within the community who understood the actions that were taking, and appreciated what was necessary to make them happen, even in the face of so many vocal opposition on the basis of issues which in many cases we considered questionable. At his meeting on the 81st meeting held on the 24th of February 2015, the ECCB Monetary Council took the decision to provide full protection for all depositors of the CCB and the NBA. This was before this government came to office on April 22nd, 2015. And those of you who are paying attention will note that that is exactly a year since this government came to office, and exactly a year since we pledged to implement a resolution so that this challenge that had been facing us for so long could be resolved. And I can report that on the 24th of February 2015, the former Chief Minister, the Honorable Hubert Hughes, signed the Eastern Caribbean Asset Management Corporation Agreement, which effected the opportunity for us to now move forward with the legislation and make the necessary amendments to fit the purposes of the resolution process here in Anguilla. After careful and comprehensive analysis of the challenges that were affecting the operations of the CCB and the NBA, the Monetary Council and the Government of Anguilla agreed that discontinuing the operation of the banks was the best option for safeguarding the deposits which were held at the banks. The Government of Anguilla, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, supported by the IMF, the World Bank, and CDB, devised a plan so that domestic deposits will be protected following the resolution, a plan that was already ably articulated by the governor just a few moments ago. There is something of concern that I'm certain that families in Anguilla would want to hear, especially families of those persons who are employed as staff at the CCB and the NBA. Employees of the CCB and the NBA will be employed on a month-to-month basis for the first 3 months after the resolution of the banks. Following the 3 months, a decision will be taken on which employees will be employed by the NCBA, that's the National Commercial Bank of Anguilla, and which will be employed by the receiver of the Deposit Protection Trust. It is intended that those employees affected by the restructuring will be both legally and compassionately compensated. I had consultations this afternoon with the staff and management of CCB and NBA, and we explained to them the nature of the transition and how it would impact their lives. It is clear that the actions that we are now taking are necessary actions for taking the process forward. And the loyal and dedicated staff of CCB and NBA are the ones who have made this possible, as well as the customers of the bank who have continued despite the challenges and the concerns and the uncertainty to provide support for the bank even during that difficult period. They remain customers, they continue to do banking business, They continued to ensure that they made deposits to their accounts because they had every confidence that the resolution will take place apace. Today, the National Commercial Bank of Anguilla Limited, which was incorporated in December 2015 under the laws of Anguilla, is now licensed by the central bank. As the governor pointed out, it was appointed for the sole purpose of purchasing and acquiring assets and liabilities of CCB and NBA, to protect the depositors and to ensure the continuity of indigenous banking services. On Monday morning, when the bank opens, the National Commercial Bank of Anguilla, it will be opening in the same buildings, providing the same services, serving the same customers, and banking business will continue as normal. The bank will offer the same banking products and services previously extended by CCB and NBA. Those operations on the 25th of April 2016 will take place from the very premises occupied by these banks. I want to point out that the National Commercial Bank of Anguilla is wholly owned by the Government of Anguilla, and it is governed by a 7-member board whose expertise spans several disciplines, including banking and central banking. Of course, the chairman, Mr. Calvert Petty, is well known to all of you. He's a son of the soil. And the 2 other members of the boards who are residents of Anguilla, Mr. Carl Harrigan, a former Financial Secretary, Permanent Secretary of Finance in the Government of Anguilla, and Mrs. Vida Lloyd Richardson, an entrepreneur on this island and a member for some time of the Public Service Commission. She may well have been chairman. The other board members are Sir Errol Allen. He was a former deputy governor of the central bank, now retired, and Mr. Marius St. Rose, a former vice president of the Caribbean Development Bank, Mr. Ian Shinapu, a consultant and somebody who worked in the banking sector and financial services for a long period of time. He actually has visited Anguilla, providing services over that period as well. And Mr. Martin Denning. Mr. Martin Denning is the board director who was nominated by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and we know him well because he would have served as the conservator for the banks a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago. The way forward must certainly be to ensure that we continue to engage the community so that they can understand exactly what is taking place. This is a period of uncertainty, and I've charged the staff of the CCB and NBA to continue to provide the sensitive and compassionate service that they provide to customers over the years, because it is important for Anguilla, not only the banking sector, but for Anguilla, that the transition takes place in an atmosphere of quiet, because it is important for the public to understand the critical nature of the process that is taking place now. They must understand that they will continue to be able to avail themselves of the banking services that they had over the years, that the bank is now a credible institution with a board of directors that are very competent and is now operating under the new Banking Act, which make provisions for certain guidelines to ensure that we have more frequent on-site examinations, foreclosure legislation, upgrading provision and guidelines, and review of existing and publishing of new prudential guidelines, the implementation of deposit insurance in the medium term, the establishment of a credit bureau, the establishment of the Eastern Caribbean Appraisal Institute, all those issues that we were concerned about in the past, and which the governor, in his presentation, also ably mentioned. The Deposit Protection Trust have been clearly explained by the governor. There's been a lot of discussion about Social Security deposits, and these are also now backed by the Bank Resolution Act. And all remaining assets and liabilities will be placed in the receivership. But definitely the Government of Anguilla has made sure that 100% protection of depositors will be an aspect of this resolution. And we are certain that with your help and your support, we can make it work. I want to reiterate what we expect of the Anguillan community, because they must play a pivotal role in the success of the resolution going forward. To date, your support, loyalty, and patience has been exceptional. But you can continue to assist by showing confidence in the resolution strategy. Remain a depositor of the NCBA and continue normal banking practice. And as the governor suggested, speak to your relatives and friends about the importance of being committed to the National Commercial Bank of Anguilla, because indeed, it is and will be the only national bank in Anguilla at this time. I look forward to your continued support. May God bless you all, and may God bless Anguilla.